If you watch my podcast, The Half-Blood Hill Show, you know that I think that Sally Jackson is the best character in this series, apart from the main trio, and I might even like her better than Grover, so that's saying something. I figured that with the show recently ending, now would be as good a time as any for this awesome lady to get a video of her own. So let's talk about her. Let's talk about why I love Sally Jackson. Let's begin with the obvious. Sally Jackson's role in the story is that of the hero's mother. Not only does she nail it, but I think Riordan writes this character archetype better than any other writer in the young adult demographic. In most stories like Percy Jackson, parents are either A, dead because having them in the story is inconvenient, or B, the epitome of human garbage because they typically serve as a continuous or at least initial roadblock to the main hero's adventure. Sally Jackson is neither. Sally is, in my opinion, the type of parent that I one day aspired to become, and I love that Riordan wrote her like that. I feel like in today's media, there's been this push for women in fiction to move away from the Molly Weasley type of character and towards the tough-like archetype. And that's not really a criticism, more of just an observation. And here's my best attempt at what I'm trying to get at. For a very long time in books, televisions, and movies, women served roles as either doting mothers who were wholly domestic and had no life outside of raising their child, or they were the damsel in distress for our strong and dashing male hero to save. Understandably, the reception to this type of character grew colder, and many studios and authors began to make their female characters, well, characters. What? Writing the script made me think of Disney and how we evolved from characters like Cinderella to characters like Rapunzel from Tangled and Meg from Hercules. See, I am tying this back into Greek mythology. But those two characters had backstories and complexity and were just prizes to be won by their male heroes. And I also think it's fair to say that because of that, they were typically well-liked. But I think eventually what's happened is that the traditional female qualities, for lack of a better word, began to become demonized or seen as weak. And what I love about Sally as a character is that she embraces those qualities, things like motherhood, sacrifice, patience, unconditional love, softness, and her role as the backbone of her family, and turn them into genuine strengths. It's not really much of an argument to say that if the scale was Molly Weasley to Carol Danvers, Sally is definitely on the Molly Weasley side of it. Yet I would argue that without a doubt, Sally represents what so many writers want in their books, movies, and TV shows better than most, which is a strong female character. Sally is an absolute bastion of endurance. The struggles she went through in her life would be enough to break anyone. When she was young, her parents died in a plane crash, and because of that she had to move in with her abusive uncle, and during high school that uncle got sick and she had to drop out of school to take care of him. Percy explains her whole situation perfectly in The Lightning Thief, where he writes, after he died, she was left with no money, no family, and no diploma. On top of that, just a few years later, Sally's gonna end up a single mother before getting married to the scum of the earth, Gabe Ugliano, who, you guessed it, is abusive to her. And honestly, ask yourself, if you read that character's backstory without knowing it was Sally Jackson, my guess is you'd assume that that character would be a broken and incredibly spiteful person, and I can't think of qualities that describe Sally less. Sally not only speaks glowingly of Poseidon to Percy, but Percy even describes her as the best person in the world, which I don't know about you, but I was not describing my parents like that when I was 12. What I'm about to say next actually has nothing to do with Virginia Cole's acting ability. I think she was great for the character she was portraying. I just don't necessarily feel like that character was book Sally, if that makes any sense.
On my way home on Sunday, I'm going to stop at D'Angelo's and pick up sandwiches in time for tip-off. But if you make this miserable, I'm going to go anyway, and then I'm going to eat my sandwich and yours while I listen to the game on the radio.
No, I hate watching the Knicks alone.
So do I.
I think that by making Sally more assertive and willing to be confrontational, it made her a completely different character than what she was in the books. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but it is different. What Sally shows in the books, and I believe teaches indirectly to Percy, is the power behind enduring kindness, and that the world does not have the power to break or change you if you refuse to allow it. One of the lines that Cole's version of Sally had that I loved was when she's telling Percy the story of his namesake and says,
He and his mother were placed in a wooden chest and cast out into the sea by a very angry king, alone, afraid, and at night, his mother would whisper in his ear, "Hold fast, Perseus, brave the storm that was made to break us, for we are unbreakable as long as we have each other."
I think that lesson perfectly embodies Sally and her greatness. I also feel that my love for Sally grows throughout the series, particularly in comparison to the awful parents that seem to exist in this universe. The Dare family and Beryl Grace being two particular standouts. But one thing that I feel is overlooked is the role Sally and May play in the development of their children, Percy and Luke respectively. As I've grown up and reread the story, it's so obvious how similar Luke and Percy are in their beliefs. I really do think that Sally deserves credit for instilling these strong core values into Percy that May was unable to, due to the curse of the Oracle, give Luke, which made Luke more susceptible to his fate. Without Sally, who was always looking out for Percy and keeping pure bitterness from corrupting him, who knows how Percy could have turned out. Sally Jackson was always this beacon of light in Percy's corner, and while the character undergoes many changes in the show, most of which weren't exactly my cup of tea, I really do like this scene where Percy comes home from Yancey Academy and there's this beautiful interaction.
Sorry, I'm just very glad to see you. I found Gabe on the phone with the headmaster. He told me what he thinks happened with Nancy Bobofit. I told him I believe my kid. It was a real sure call.
It so perfectly shows how she is on Percy's side and will never stand as an obstacle in his way. At times, she might be this guardrail or a safety line guiding him away from poor decisions, but never as an obstacle for Percy to overcome. The last thing I want to say about Sally is that I love her pure and unrestrained presentation of maternal love. I could write pages and pages of examples of Sally's unconditional love for her son, but I'll stick with two examples. First, there's Gabe. While never directly stated, a reader can assume that Percy is not the only victim of Gabe's abuse. As we read through the introductory chapters of The Lightning Thief, we as readers consistently ask ourselves, why is Sally putting up with this? Or why is she staying here? Or if you were an incredibly mature young adult reader, you might have even been wondering what factors are stopping Sally from being able to leave. And what we learn is that it could have been all too easy for Sally to leave. She's one of the few mortal parents to know about Camp Half-Blood right from the jump. She could have dropped Percy off at camp when things got tough, left the burden of raising a child behind, and never even married Smelly Gabe. But she didn't do that. She loved Percy too much to discard him. She knew her son walked around with this target on his back due to his parentage, and rather than be spiteful of Poseidon or give Percy back to what other demigod mortal parents see as the other world, she kept Percy as close to her as she could and married a man who abused her, knowing his scent would keep Percy safe. And she did all of that without uttering a single word of regret or negativity to anyone. The other example I'd like to focus on is the encounter with the Minotaur. For context, Sally is a clear-sighted mortal. This allows her to see past the curtain, hiding the Greek mythology world called the Mist, but it does not give her demigod-like strength, speed, or reflexes, yet she is the first person to stand against the Minotaur when it comes after Percy and unconscious Grover. For those who don't remember, Sally and Percy were interrupted on their Montauk vacation by Grover, who warned Sally that something was after them. At this point, Sally has finally accepted that if she wants to keep her son safe, she has to let go of the single shred of selfishness she ever had in her life and give up her son to the safety of Camp Half-Blood for, as far as she knows at this point, the rest of her life. On the way to camp, the car is struck by lightning and she is injured, Grover is unconscious, and Percy, much to Sally's relief, is relatively fine. But when she recognizes that it is the Minotaur after them, Sally instantly makes the decision without hesitation that she is willing to die for her son, telling Percy to abandon her and get to Camp Half-Blood. In the text it reads, this interaction reads, "He doesn't want us, my mother told me. He wants you. Besides, I can't cross the property line. But we don't have time, Percy. Go, please." Of course, we know in the end that everything works out, and that Percy, motivated by the love and sacrifice of his mother, will successfully reunite with her after her apparent death. But she didn't know that when she decided to die for her son, and that truly says it all. But what do you think about Sally Jackson? Do you love her as much as I do, or do you think I've been spending all this time bloviating about nothing? I'd also love to know what you think about live-action Sally Jackson compared to book Sally, and which do you think was better and why? With that, thank you all so much for watching, and please be sure to check out the Half-Blood Hill show on this channel for more Percy Jackson content. Until next time, everyone, peace. Hey there guys, Outro Jared here. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll also love my podcast, The Half-Blood Hill Show, where me and my co-host Jay break down the Percy Jackson series chapter by chapter. I also post weekly on Medium, so if you want more of my written content, that's the place to look. Thanks again so much for your support. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and until next time, peace.